That's what I'm talking about. Welcome to the Show Up Podcast. My name is Calvin Nowell, and my whole life I've been working to show up.
You have great potential.
Show up for my friendships, show up for my family, show up for my health, and show up for my future. Showing up means looking at what's happening in life and navigating through what I can do to make it better.
Keep your focus.
Make it better. Make it more meaningful and make a difference, not only for me, but for everyone around me.
The people who really care for you are rooting for your rise.
I'm still a work in progress.
All I gotta do is show up, show up.
But I'm gonna get there.
Brave enough to try again this time.
This podcast offers advice from experts who know how to take the next step to help you reach your full potential. Thanks for hanging out with me. Now let's show up. What's up, everyone? This is Calvin Nowell. You are listening to the Show Up Podcast. I am here today in the studio with my wonderful co-host and friend, Miss Joy Tribble.
Oh, yeah. Back at it. Ready. You know, Hurricane Irma, she's rude.
Yeah, she
stopped me from being able to make it, but I'm back.
Yeah, she was supposed to be on this interview with me and John Gray, but Hurricane Irma had other plans for her to keep her in Atlanta. But we had a really good time because John Gray, for those that don't know, John Gray is a associate pastor at Lakewood Church. He is a singer, a comedian, an author. His new book is called I Am Number 8. And
he's on the OWN show.
Yeah, he's on the OWN network. That's Oprah's Winfrey network, for those that don't know. Hi, Mom.
OWN. Hey, Mama.
Oh, we love her, though. Anyway, he's on her network, and he has a new show called The Book of John Gray. And so it was a really great interview because we talked about in this episode what it's like being overlooked.
Yeah, man.
And we know John from college. Ooh. So
18, 19.
University of Cincinnati.
You see?
African American Cultural Research Center Choir.
AACRC.
Yes. We know him from those days. And so we go way back with him. And what was great about this interview, Joy, is that it wasn't just a professional interview. It was like the homie talking to the homie.
Yeah, buddy to buddy.
Buddy to buddy.
Yeah.
And, you know, we asked all the questions. And so it's real personal. So I think people are going to really like it just because it's very authentic. And we just got to say this. We're really proud of John Gray for everything that God is doing in his life. And we watch from the sidelines and we know what it was like. We saw him make this journey, and it's really encouraging because I don't know about you, Joy, but sometimes I feel overlooked.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because more often than I'd like to think, I have that overlooked feeling, you know, going after destiny, trying to create the future, and feeling like you're just not getting ahead.
Right,
totally. Yeah.
And so I think when people listen to this episode, they're going to be really encouraged. And it's just friends talking about what it's like being overlooked and how to make it into your destiny. And so without further ado, here's the episode with Pastor John Gray. John Gray, what is up?
Calvin Nowell, the man, the myth, the legend.
I am so excited about this episode because this has
Don't yell at me.
Okay, just a quick disclaimer for everybody that's listening. There's going to be a lot of laughter. I don't even know if I'll be able to get through half of this interview because this guy I've known since 1993 in University of Cincinnati. We were a part of the African American Cultural Research Center Choir. And John is, I said earlier, but I'll say it again, he's been one of the biggest influence in my life as it relates to singing. And so I'm just glad to have you here.
And life and manhood.
And life and manhood. John is a big influence.
Don't relegate me to some tiny portion of your amazingness.
Well, all I can say is that today we want to talk about what it's like being overlooked. And I know you have your book, I Am Number 8.
Yes, sir.
But the whole purpose of this episode is to just talk about your story a little bit, how you got into what you were doing now. But also, dude, I'm going to ask questions for the people just because I think what we're trying to figure out is there are a lot of people that feel overlooked. And there are a lot of people saying, okay, but how do I get from here to here? What are some practical steps? So with no further ado, can you just tell us your story?
Well, I mean, that's longer than we have time for, so I'll probably have to hit the bullet points. But going all the way back to when you and I met, I had flunked out of the College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio. I got a $40,000 scholarship, which seemed like a lot, $10,000 a year. But when your school costs $20,000 a year, I guess, my mother was still paying, which I really didn't know. I had been accepted to Tuskegee University, but I didn't qualify for financial aid. And I was like, I'm not going down there and I have to pay.
Right.
In hindsight, I really wasn't mentally and emotionally prepared for college life. And going back, I probably would have made a different decision on where I went to school. The reason why I'm bringing that up is because foundationally, things would have shifted for my life had I been in a different atmosphere. Worcester was a very liberal place. You could do whatever you want.
Right.
You know, kids are away from home for the first time. This was right at the advent. This was right when the internet and computers were beginning to become mainstream, you know. And I wasn't really academically as, you know, committed. So I didn't have direction. I didn't have direction. And so I used the lack of direction as an excuse to not go to school and do the work. And couple that with my grandmother being diagnosed with cancer, and I was extremely close to her, my mother's mother. And so all of that just kind of had me into a downward depression, a spiral. Yeah. And I ended up flunking out of after the first semester of my sophomore year. I find myself back in Cincinnati, Ohio, our hometown. I was working at a pharmacy and at Wesley Child Care Center.
I remember that.
And just really trying to figure out who I was. Decided, let me take some classes at UC. I pop into the African American Cultural and Research Center, find out they have a choir. Yes. You know, music was always my passion. And then I meet this guy named Calvin Nowell, you know, who was a Darwin T. Turner scholar, marketing major, brilliant, you know, comedic. And we hit it off, man. And I remember during those days.
Well, I gotta say this though. When I first met you, I was like, well, I had joined the choir just to be able to meet people. And so that was really my only intention of getting in it. But then I met you during rehearsal, and you are hilarious. But I gotta say this. When I first met you, I was like, man, what do you do? John was like, oh, I'm in a movie with Denzel Washington called Listen.
Listen. It was about a guy named Malik Mark. He told me Denzel was in it, and I told the world, and none of it was true.
Dude, none of it was true. John was telling me he was in this movie, and I was like, oh, man, I met this dude in college. He gonna be in a movie with Denzel Washington. But anyway, John is very hilarious, and you really encouraged me. Like, I've told you this, but I'll say it again. Like, when I didn't start singing until I got into college. And if it wasn't for you, I remember, I don't know where we were, but you were saying, if you would just sing the way you play around, you know, and I just didn't have any confidence. And I just remember that you really, really, really have spoke a lot of life into me as it relates to confidence in singing, as it relates to moving to Nashville. John is the reason that I do live in Nashville.
Wow.
I remember I was having a dark season in Pittsburgh, and you called me, and I prayed that night. I said, Lord, speak something to me in the middle of the night. Just whisper something.
And it was like 2 or 3 in the morning.
2 or 3 in the morning. And I answered the phone, and you just say, man, you need to move to Nashville. You didn't even say hello. And immediately I knew that I heard from the Lord, and I left and followed you back to Cincinnati, because you came to town, to Pittsburgh, and I knew that the Lord said, follow him home. And I really appreciate you, and I just want to thank you. I'm not going to get too emotional.
Cry. I'm not going
to do it, though, but I do want to thank you, because you really have been that person in my life. And if ever I get anything, I would say in heaven, I owe you royalties for what you've done in my life.
Jesus.
So I appreciate that. And but anyway, so you were in school.
Yeah, I was in school. And the reason why, I remember there was one time we were in rehearsal, and I heard you singing. And then I was like, do that again. You're like, no, man, no. And I got mad. And I got mad because I know what it's like to have a gift, and you have to apologize for it, or you have to minimize it to make other people feel good. Or maybe there's a personal insecurity. Mm-hmm. And when I heard you sing, I realized that's one of the gifts God was going to use to open doors for you. And I got mad because my gift through my pain is to unlock people's greatness. Mm. That's my gift. I can always see who's next. and I can always see greatness.
Wow.
I saw it on you then. I see it on you now. I've always seen it, and I've always celebrated it. Now, we have fun. You and I, we clown.
Yeah.
And it's none of y'all business what we... But you know this, when it comes to the calling on your life, the gifts that you have, I've always been very adamant about speaking into them. And here's why. The overlooked aspect. I felt like I've always been overlooked. You know, growing up in Cincinnati is not super progressive.
Right.
You know, and the community's very small, but if it's all you know, it's all you know. Like, you lived in Forest Park. I lived in Avondale.
Yeah.
So going to Forest Park was like going out of town.
Totally.
Like, whoa, they have, you know, houses with a yard. You know, I lived in an apartment.
Right.
It was a nice apartment.
Dana Avenue.
Yeah, Dana Avenue, man.
Yes.
And we had a lot of great times there, a lot of times of worship and just talking and just growing. But, you know, Cincinnati can wear on your dreams.
Totally.
It is not a place where dreams come to pass.
Yeah, it's very complacent.
Yeah.
It's very conservative.
Yeah, you do your job, you go home,
right,
and just live a regular life. I'm not called to live a regularly scheduled life. I'm called to do something that will outlast me. And so you gotta ruffle feathers. You gotta, you know, create seismic, you know, shifts. And what's interesting is who I am now is at the core who I was then, but nobody saw it.
Right. Well, let me just say this. You know, when I first met you, first of all, when I first met John, he was like the Wanye from Boys to Men. Like, me and my best friend Keenan would be like, dude, John Gray is Wanye. Like, vocally just was unparalleled in the city. One of the best singers in the city that I knew. But also he was very funny, you know, and those gifts were so big. The singing and the comedy were so big. But I remember in college, you had got a call to preach. And I remember going to your first sermon at Bethel Baptist Church.
Yes, sir. I
remember sitting there in the back. Can you just kind of explain or tell people how you first, because that's where God is really using you majorly.
Absolutely.
And I saw it from the beginning. I've never heard you really talk about what was going on with you in the midst of school and God birthing you a desire for the word.
You know, that's interesting because no one's ever really asked me what was going on in my mind during that time. Coming back home after failing out of school, losing my grandmother, trying to get direction, trying to figure out what I want to do.
Right.
You know, I had no direction. I wanted to be a lawyer or maybe a politician. But I knew that the Lord had already called me. I knew at 13 I was called to ministry. But because of some of the pastoral relationships that, you know, I had, ministry wasn't something I was excited about. Because there was always a disconnect between the what I read about Jesus and what I experienced with people.
Yeah.
Who say they represent Jesus. Like, well, your heart doesn't really reflect his heart. And so I was confused about the practical application of being a Christ follower and the examples that were in front of me, other than my mother. Because Alice Gray is a true woman of God.
One of the best in this whole world.
One of the best to ever do it, brother. And whatever I am stems from the example that she set. But I remember on my 21st birthday, I accepted my calling to ministry in front of the church.
Yep.
I walked down and everything in my life shifted from there because up until then, my life was in a holding pattern. What I realized is God, out of his love, frustrated all these other personal plans because he knew that this was actually, when I matured, exactly where I wanted to be. And at 21, I accepted my calling on June 26th. It was 94. And that September, I did my first sermon.
Yeah.
And within a year, I was touring with Kirk Franklin.
Now, I got to say this because I remember all of this. And I think what I was thinking in that moment was like, man, why does John want to be a preacher when he's so funny and he's so good as a singer? And I mean, that takes, because you had two big gifts that could have taken you in different directions. You could have been a comedian. You could have done albums. You could have done all that. But you went for the calling that's on your life, the preaching. And I would say to most people around, nobody saw what we see now. Like, you saw it, we didn't see that. And even the people that see the potential in you probably overlooked the preacher. Because, I mean, we went to church together and I'm sorry, but ain't nobody asked you to preach.
No, they didn't.
They didn't.
They wanted, and I think, here's the thing. I think a lot of pastors saw the gift, but there's always a Saul that produces David.
Yeah.
And there has to be someone there that sees you but won't acknowledge you. And what it does is it gives you a heart for other people. Because when you've been overlooked and undervalued and marginalized and minimized, when you get the platform, you're not like, see, I told y'all. It's almost like God did it, so let me see who else is like me so I can bring them up. Yeah. I've never been insecure about anybody else's gift. I don't want anyone else's platform. I don't want anybody else's anointing.
Right.
I just want to be who God created me to be. And I think that preaching, because that wasn't what I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to sing. I wanted to be Luther. I wanted to be,
totally.
you know, Boys to Men. That was my thing. And then the comedy was great. And for a while I did comedy.
Yeah, right.
And I was doing comedy in arenas.
Right.
You know, 12,000 people.
Yeah.
People like, you should do, you know, the Laugh Factory in LA. I was like, that's 150 people.
Right.
I'm not looking to get discovered because I know who I am.
That's good.
And so when you know who you are, Calvin, you can't unknow it. And when I realized that my gift was for something else and somehow God was going to use all of these different gifts and make one thing. And now I look at me and I look around and I don't see anybody doing what I do exactly. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Because, you know, normally preachers are real fiery or you're a comedian or you're a singer.
Yeah.
But I integrate all that because I told God, I want to be everything you made me. If you really want me to serve you, then let me be me. And he said, that's exactly who I called. And so I was like, oh, so I don't have to wear a robe? You mean I can laugh? I can be funny?
Yeah.
I can tell the truth. I can be broken. I can tell people I'm scared. I can tell them I failed. And
it became the niche.
Right.
Your authentic self became the niche that opened up all the doors. You know, I got to say this because just last night or 2 nights ago, you were doing the hand-in-hand Hurricane Harvey relief in Los Angeles. And, I mean, guys, for those that didn't see it, you had everybody on the show from Oprah Winfrey, Justin Bieber, Tyler Perry, George Clooney, Tom Hanks. I mean,
Julia Roberts, and Barbara Streisand.
If you name any person, John Gray, I was looking and I said, that is not John Gray in the back. And I was just excited and tripping out and hearing John pray over the nation with Justin Bieber. I don't know if people watched it, felt this, that know you, but man, it really floored me to see what God has done from Cincinnati to this. And you know what I loved about it? It didn't seem like it had you. It didn't seem like you were real humble, you were sober. You know what I mean? At the same time, you were honest and real. You wasn't trying to be in false humility like, this ain't no big deal. You was like, man, it's just amazing to see what God can do.
Yeah.
You know, and I appreciate that because I'll be honest with you, I don't know too many people within the community of faith that have as much influence that I really do feel like the Lord has given you. I mean, all of our friends, we talk privately and we just say like, man, God's hand is all over you. And I want to ask this because I know you decided to preach when you were younger, but like, where do you feel like the shift? What season of life were you in where you felt like, okay, I started to see God turn this, you know, was it marriage? Was it, but there was something where it was like, it went from here, where it really turned. Yeah. And I don't know if people would know that yet.
I think what it was, when I was living in Nashville, I had built my house and I had my house built on faith. My credit was hilarious. I had no money and I was an itinerant evangelist. So I didn't have steady income, but I believed God. And down there in Lenox Village,
I remember,
you know, I had my house built and I would sit on that porch on the second level and I would cry just thanking God that I don't know how I got a house when, you know, before I could barely afford an apartment when I was living in New Jersey as a youth pastor. And I think about just the journey of each progression. And I was in Nashville, and I got a call to be a singles pastor in Gainesville, Georgia, for a guy named Jensen Franklin. Gainesville is not the bastion of diversity.
Right.
You know, it's very conservative. You know, there are some elements of, you know, nationalism, I'll say it kindly, and there were some racist elements, and I felt like that's exactly where I was supposed to go. I've always run to the fire. I've always run to the thing that's not like me, because I'm determined to be the one that makes a difference.
Right.
I'm the bridge.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go there, and I wanted to see if I could add value to a church that didn't look like me, with people that didn't come from where I came from, because I could play it safe and exist in the African-American church tradition, but it would do God a tremendous disservice if I stayed in the safe place.
Right.
And I think 2006, when I went there, 2007, when I went to Gainesville and I moved there, that was the beginning of what people see today. And that's been 10 years now. But that was the beginning of God stretching me, because my heart was always for reconciliation and diversity and worship. And I always had a heart for different types of expression in music and arts and creativity. But my limited my limited ability to access different things, you know, kind of hamstrung me. But all of a sudden, when I'm living in Gainesville, Georgia, and I'm meeting people, I realize color is less of a factor than economics and education.
Right.
And I started realizing that we're a lot more alike than we are divided. And so I started, you know, utilizing this new information and integrating that in the way that I communicated. And so my ability to speak to diverse audiences grew. And that was the beginning. And I think I saw Hillsong. I went to a Hillsong Conference in Australia in 2009.
Were you attending or were you speaking?
I was attending.
Okay.
I went over there with $200 in my pocket, and somebody promised me I'd have a place to stay. And when I got there, they didn't have a place for me to stay. But by a miracle, somebody paid for my hotel stay when I got to Australia, halfway around the world. I went on faith because I was disillusioned by some of the things I saw. And I said, God, I need to know if this is real and what you want me to do. And I'll never forget, no one at Hillsong knew me. I walk in the lobby of the hotel, and there's Joel Osteen. And he walks up to me. I walk up to him and introduce myself, tell him, I said, yo, you really blessed me. And he says, I know you. You're John Gray.
No way.
He says, I heard you preach a sermon on TBN. And it was great. And he repeated the sermon verbatim.
Wow.
And what I realized, I said, oh my gosh, Joel Osteen knows my name. And then when I got to the conference, they had my name on a seat, just John Gray. I took a picture of it. And I realized that I have a seat at the table that I didn't even know about.
Wow.
And I think people need to know that even if people don't acknowledge you, there will come a point where God will allow you to see that you are not forgotten.
Yeah.
And so 2009, things began to ramp up. After that conference, I realized that the church is global. It has a local calling, but we also have a global family.
Right.
And so there are different methods of expression and worship. There are different cultural things that are specific to a particular people group. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it's different from my traditions, but it's the same Jesus. And so what I came to embrace is that I'm the guy that connects all that. So I've been able to go to a Hillsong or a Southern Baptist or a Church of God or a Methodist or, you know, millennial church or a non-denominational church and all of these different cultures. And that's because that's my calling, to bring all of us together. And I want to stay that broad.
Yeah.
And I think when I got home, I got an invitation to Lakewood to speak at a youth conference, a young adult conference. Then they kept inviting me back.
Wow.
And by 2012, they asked me to consider coming on staff. And we moved in February of 13.
Yep.
And we've been there ever since.
And then I guess from there, it was just kind of like on autopilot. Like it just started to ramp up.
Yeah, and it's strange because by then, there were people who knew who I was. But along with being married, because there was a favor that comes with getting married. I was terrified of marriage because my mom and dad divorced. I only saw divorce. I don't know how to be committed. I don't know how to stay. I don't know what it means to be a father. My mother was diagnosed with end-stage pancreatic cancer with months after I got married, you know. So there was a whole lot going on in my life at one point, and my faith took hit after hit, and all my insecurities came calling. Oh, now I'm getting married. I was 37 and, you know, a virgin. Me and my wife, we waited until we were married to come together. And so the insecurities of being married and this body that I don't particularly like, now I've got to unveil in front of someone. Will I be rejected? The types of things that men don't talk about.
Yes,
the things that a father should be speaking to me.
Absolutely.
And so I had to battle in my own brain. And you know, this is the worst place. Your mind is the worst place to work things out. You need a community. That's why conversations like this and Show Up podcast is so critical, that we can have honest dialogue, because I was paralyzed by fear. But I kept going.
See,
bro.
That's the thing. I got to just pause, because that's the difference between me and you. I let fear stop me. Like if something doesn't work, it takes me a while to get back up. And I can say that I just see you. I can just remember you just have never been afraid. Like you would always just show up as you are, and you just always had this confidence, and whether you felt it, you had it. And I heard something, Mel Robbins said something the other day, really blew my mind. She said, confidence isn't a feeling, it's a decision. You decide to be confident, you know. And I look back over our lives, and yours in particular, I just was like, man, you probably were just afraid, just like the rest of us, but you decided to be confident, and the doors just open. Now, I know the doors open at Lakewood, but sometimes people can look at it and say, well, man, he's an associate pastor at a big church. Maybe that's the end or whatever. And man, just in the last few years, what God is doing to you in the mainstream as it relates to being a pastor or a person that speaks life, I got to ask you, because you're not going to be on my podcast and I don't talk about how you met my television mother, Oprah Winfrey. You gotta give us that. You gotta give me that.
You know, I met Oprah a few years ago in Dallas at MegaFest. She was there with Bishop Jakes, and there was a certain amount of people that were able to meet her and take a picture. But I think you had to register, or you had to, you know, do something, which I didn't do. I stood in the line, me and my wife. I had on my Tupac shirt, and we stood in the line, and they let us through. We weren't supposed to get through, but we did. And we took the photo, and I remember putting it up on Instagram. This is like 4 years ago, probably more. Yeah. And I said, so excited to announce, you know, my new show on Oprah's network called John 3:16. And it's revolving around my life and how I interact with my wife and my kids and my weight.
And you didn't have it.
I had nothing. And then at the end of the post, I said, I'm just prophesying, y'all. None of what I said has happened yet. LOL. And everybody started congratulating me. So strange. I spoke it.
You sure did.
I met her in that moment. And then a few years later, my buddy Rich Wilkerson had a show. He had a show called Rich in Faith. He's the guy that married Kim and Kanye.
Yeah.
So he got a reality show on another network. And the guy who was a producer on that, Jason Kennedy from E! News, reached out to me and said, John, you know, me and Richie were thinking, yo, we could do a show around you. What do you think? And I was like, well, let's talk about it. We talked about concepts and all of that. And so the first thing you do, you have to get a production company. And I'm going to make this super short to tell you how we got to Oprah. So we went and met with production companies, pitched the show idea. Everybody wanted it. I had to make a decision. I went with a production company I felt gave us the best opportunity to win. They put the reel together over months. And then you give it to the networks. And then you go into pitch meetings with the networks. So we went and met with everybody. And everybody wanted it. But at OWN, Oprah has to see it. And so she hadn't seen it. So one Wednesday night, I was preaching at Lakewood at this point. I'm the associate pastor, one of the associate pastors at Lakewood, and my primary responsibility is our midweek service. And at the end of my sermon, I just did kind of what I did when I called you that night. I just prophesied. And I said, your miracle is on your phone. Check your text messages. Check your email. And I left the platform and I went to my phone. I had a missed call from an executive from OWN.
Get out of here.
And a text. And I called and she said, are you sitting down? And I said, yes. She said, Oprah saw your reel and she didn't finish it. She stopped it and said, who is this? Can he come to my house next week?
I just flatlined.
I want to film him for Super Soul Sunday.
What? Off of the reel?
Yes, off of our presentation tape.
Yeah.
And the next week, my wife and I flew to California.
Santa Barbara. Montecito.
Yeah. And we're escorted to this house. And they said, this is Maya Angelou's library. These are the books that were in her personal library. So I'm sitting in a room and I'm like, this house is gorgeous. They were like, this is a guest house. I was like, oh. This is not the main?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can stay here forever.
Yeah.
And then when I got finished, like literally spacing out, it was time to go meet her. I had not met her. Mm-hmm. You only meet her when you're walking towards the trees in Super Soul Sunday.
Oh, so that is real.
Yeah, that's real. That's a real intro. That's the real moment.
Okay.
I never met her.
So that wasn't you hadn't met her and it's like, okay, let's go out and do it now. It was like, so when you were like, this is Oprah Winfrey, it was just on camera.
Yes. And so there we are talking, laughing, and her crew is laughing while the interview is going on, like gut bucket, like everybody shush because you're too loud. You know me, I'm a clown.
Right.
And when it was over, she said, that was great. And then she called some of her staff over. She said, take John and Aventer to the main house. We're going to have tea. And she looked at me and she said, we need to discuss our further business arrangement. I was like, I just peed.
peed.
I just peed a little bit. I need an adult diaper. Thank you. Bro, so her staff starts scrambling like gerbils, just running around in the woods. and they come get us in a golf cart and drive us through the most beautiful landscape I've ever seen up to this house that takes your breath away. You walk up steps into the living room, beyond to a back area, a deck, and you can see the ocean and this expanse of land. And then she comes out and she says, what a great job. Let me show you my rose garden. We start walking.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, this is crazy because Aventer, my wife of 6.5 years, had a dream like a month before. Mm-hmm. And she woke me up. She said, babe, I had a dream that we were walking with Oprah Winfrey. I was like, all right, babe, you had pizza. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right,
come on.
Yeah, like that's pretty big.
She said, no, she was holding my hand and we were walking in a garden. I was like, all right, Av, that's good, babe.
Right.
Going back to sleep unless you want to do something else. If not, you're going to bed.
Keep my podcast clean.
This is because I'm holy. Ishka. I'm married. In the bullshit. But
my God.
When we got there, Oprah grabbed her hand and started walking her through a rose garden. And I was behind them and I said, Av, your dream. And she said, oh my God, Miss Winfrey, I had a dream that you were holding my hand and walking me through a garden a month ago.
Wow.
And then we went and we sat in one of these areas in her garden and we started talking about what the show could be. Yeah. And what would make us different. And we shared some very wonderful, profound, private moments. And at the end of it, she said, well, that's it. The meeting is over. And I was like, did I say something wrong? You know, 'cause she just cut it off.
Like, do I need to leave? Right.
She was like, no, it's done. Welcome to the family. Oprah welcomed me to the Oprah Winfrey Network.
Did you keep your composure or did you fall out?
No, I stood up and I started screaming.
Okay.
And they took a picture of me standing like, in this little open area with my hands straight up. Yeah. And I'm built like SpongeBob SquarePants from the back. So, I look like an upside down pyramid, bro. It's horrible. Pray for me. I got like the tiniest legs. I
ain't got no room to talk.
Listen, bro, we are family. We're going to work it out together.
Yeah, we are.
And then she said, come on, get on the cart. I want to take you around the property. She's showing me places where she meditates, prays, where she wrote a book. And I'm sitting here like, this is the most influential African-American woman in the history of media.
Totally, hands down.
And one of the most powerful women in the world, period. And there's no one she can't reach at any moment. And she's taking time to speak to my wife and I. And what I realized in that moment is that only God could have done this.
Yeah.
And I was humbled because I always wanted to meet her.
Right.
There were a lot of people I've always wanted to meet. I've always wanted to meet George Clooney because he's from our hometown. I always wanted to meet Barbara Streisand,
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm meeting George, Barbara, Cher, Julia Roberts in the same day.
What's happening in your heart when you when this happens? Like when you see Oprah, you meeting these people and you seeing that God is giving you words and you're speaking life to different people, whether you're making them laugh or whether you're encouraging them spiritually. Like what's happening in your mind? Are you just praising or are you more like...
You know what's weird? When we think of movie stars and those types of people, you think when you meet them, you're going to go bananas or you're going to ask a bunch of goofy questions or, I got a script, you want to read it? The thing that struck me the most is when I met those people, I did not want to be them. I wanted to still be me.
That's powerful.
That was the greatest lesson of being in that room a few nights ago. There was no one in that room that I wanted to trade places with.
Yeah.
I wanted to go home to my son, who's had a number of challenges because of things that were outside of his control. I want to go home to my daughter, who's a beautiful, brilliant princess. I want to go home to my wife and learn how to love her like Christ loved the church because I grew up an only child and I'm very selfish at times and I'm very insular and I need to learn how to communicate and connect with her and cover her heart. And I didn't want to trade places with anybody. I didn't want their money. I didn't want their fame. I didn't want their problems. I wanted to be John, and I wanted to make my mom proud. Yeah. I wanted to make my grandmother who's in heaven proud, and my other grandmother who's in heaven. Hopefully my father's in heaven. I wanted the people that I come from to be proud. I wanted you to be proud.
Dude, I am
not going to cry. I wanted the people who saw me when I wasn't this, who loved me when I wasn't this, to be proud. That means more to me than the platform and then meeting people. Because the truth is, most of those people that I've met and have had a chance to build a relationship with need what God has given me in the form of a word or in the form of spiritual wisdom or discernment and those types of things. And so that's one of the reasons why I think God keeps opening doors is because I don't want anything that any of them have. I'm content, Calvin.
Yeah.
If I don't do anything else, I'm content right here doing this.
So it sounds to me like what we're listening, you're just showing up being who God has authentically made you to be. Like when you did when Oprah asked you to do the Super Soul session at UCLA.
Yeah.
Bro, that I just got to say, because I don't know if I told you, I have never seen you so in your element. And I was watching it. You were hilarious. You were great with the word. You were a great communicator. You had every race, celebrities in the audience. I mean, you were really just captivating the entire audience. And I just kept watching. I'm like, this is John being John Gray. He loves the Lord. He's hilarious. He can sing. It was like everything that God had put in you. Because I called you. I was like, John, that was unreal. And so I guess what I'm saying is you really focus on just trying to be authentically you and not trying to perform to be somebody that you're not.
Yeah. Calvin, I love the name of the podcast because that's actually been my life. Whatever door is open, I just showed up. Yeah. And whatever I was had to be enough. And if who I am authentically is not enough for the place that I'm in, then that's not the place I'm supposed to be in. And every door that's open, if it's cracked, I'm going to kick it in. And you're going to know that nobody else can do what I can do. Now, what you do with that is on you.
Right.
But I have shown up and I followed behind God and I don't have ambition. in the sense of I'm not trying to get anywhere. I won't climb over people to get something.
Right.
And I think the Hollywood vibe, and sometimes even in Nashville when I was here, there are people who will step over to try to get opportunities.
Yeah, they will.
I've never been that guy. I'll sit in the back because when it's my turn, you won't be able to deny me.
Right.
That much I know.
Yeah.
But in the last few months, I said, even while I was preaching, I said, I'm in a different place now because I know who I am. I've lived a life of apology because there are a lot of people who are insecure when, you have multiple gifts. Mm-hmm. But I didn't call me and I didn't make me.
Right.
So I'm certainly not going to apologize for what God is doing in me.
Right.
And I'm going to stay great because he made me that way. And I think that every human being should be everything that they ever wanted to be and feel that they are called to be, and not allow the insecurities of other people or the limitations of other people define you. Because that's what I feel like I'm breaking away from every time I walk in one of those doors. I am there to be me. If I was a replica of someone else, I don't stand out.
Right.
Of all the preachers in all the world, all the rabbis, all the imams that could have prayed over 17 television networks, me?
Dude.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The kid from Cincinnati, the 2-bedroom apartment, Dana Avenue, across from Xavier University, graduate of the Withrow High School, no college degrees as of yet, no advanced degrees, no formal training.
God using you.
God chose me. Why would I not be everything he made me? I don't want God shaking his head saying, I gave him the platform and he was too afraid to be who I made him.
And I got to say that too, because I'm just being honest. This is show up is about being authentic too. I see pastors that have the platform that are friends with celebrities, and I'm just speaking for me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it just feels like that's what they're chasing more than they are doing this with the right kind of motive. And I can't judge the heart, and I'm not here to judge it. But I will say, I see God opening doors for you, but it doesn't seem like it has you. Like, it's not like, oh, I don't have time for you because I'm trying to hang with Tyler Perry or Oprah Winfrey or, and I just see like whether you're, and I'm going to brag about you because I'm a close friend and I see you from whether you with Justin Bieber or Chris Brown or I just don't feel like from knowing you personally, it doesn't have you. And I want to say I appreciate that. Like, and I know God's going to continue to open doors. And I just pray, man, that you can continue to be a vessel, man, because it's refreshing to us who are trying to get to our next level. We all want to be seen, heard, and valued. We all are looking for connection. We all are looking for validation. But sometimes when we get the platforms, they wind up changing us. And I can honestly say, man, it is not changing you. Like it is. And I know you have your challenges like the rest of us, but I just appreciate that. And I really appreciate you coming out on this show. But I want to conclude, what's next for John? Where are you showing up? What area of life or where do you feel like the future for you is headed and where are you showing up at?
I could give you the professional answer, or I could give you, you're one of my closest friends and I'm going to tell the truth answer. The truth is I'm tired. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I'm tired. I have fought for everybody else, but I haven't fought for me. Yeah. Haven't taken care of me. And I haven't been what I need to be for my family. This morning, I woke up, I preached last night, and my kids, both of them, ended up in my bed. And it's hard, Mm-hmm. I got a foot in my kidney and another one's over here and it's hot. I'm like, scoot over. But because I travel a lot, they need me.
Right.
And they try to spend as much time with me as they can. So I got up with them this morning and prayed with them and spent time before they went to school. And I realized that I don't want to be married to the church and date my family. I think the next place I want to show up is at home.
That's awesome.
And because there was a part of me that I was driven by the fear of rejection and also driven by what I felt was, will anybody finally see me? Because whatever I am now, this is what I've been. People like, you're an overnight sensation. I was like, yeah, I'm a 25-year overnight sensation.
Yeah.
I've been this person the whole time.
Totally.
You just never saw it.
Right.
And I guess it's God's, prerogative to unveil you at certain times. But I want to show up for my family. And then I want to be somewhere with some trees and some grass, maybe a pond so I could fish and maybe be anonymous. I don't know if that's in the plans for me. Mm-hmm. But honestly, Calvin, there's a part of me that just longs for home. Nothing really feels like home to me. And I think that's the wondering part of my heart that has never settled.
Yeah.
Is the thing that allows me to do what I do for other people. Nothing feels like home, so I don't sit still. I'm always moving.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I fit here, And there are times when I battle between passion and depression.
Yeah.
And there are times where I've had real honest dialogue with God and said, if I didn't have a family, I don't know that I'd have a will to live.
Right.
Because I do have a wife and children that need me, I'm compelled to press past my own pain and, thoughts of rejection and the different things that creep up in the human condition to keep moving. But I long for anonymity. I long to just rest. And I want to see Jesus' face.
Yeah.
And that might sound weird, but that's where I'm at. I don't have a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
I don't want to be anything other than what I am. I know that movies are coming.
Right.
I know that music is coming. I know that other opportunities are coming. But I'm not looking for them. They'll just have to show up.
Yeah.
And when they show up, I'll be faithful to it. Mm-hmm. And then I'll move on to the next thing until such time as my heart stops beating and there's no breath left. That means my time is done. But when I'm done, I hope I've left a legacy for my children to inherit that will outlast me, that my name will be good enough for them to build upon. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like I'm nearing the halfway mark, of this life. I'm 6 years from 50. And you start thinking about, what do you want to be known for?
Yeah.
And I've got young kids, so I've got a long ways to go, but that's really where I'm at. I want to show up for them.
Yeah.
And I also want to show up for me.
Yeah.
I want to kind of put my arms around myself and say, man, you know what? You've done a really good job with where you came from. I'm looking at my family and I have no contemporaries. Mm-hmm. There's nobody that I can bounce ideas off of.
Right.
And that's not saying they're bad people. God just chose me.
Right.
And so I guess that's where my heart is, man. And I want to end by saying, I'm proud of you for the way you have survived places of pain and obstacles that would have killed someone else.
Yeah.
Losing mom and dad who I loved.
Yeah.
And having to battle through myriad challenges through that loss. You have navigated those things and you still fight for other people. You're still building bridges in worship. You still have one of the most unbelievable voices anywhere in the earth. Thanks. And your pain and your process gives you a texture that no one else has. You not only have a voice that is gifted, but you have authority in worship because of the life you've lived. Man. So I'm so proud of you.
Thanks, man. I really, really appreciate that. I think in closing, if you would, because there are so many people that are like me and we feel very overlooked. One of the things that I've been saying lately is I just can't sell myself anymore to people. If they don't see it, they just don't see it. And so I was going to ask, can you just say a prayer for everyone that's listening that feels like me in certain areas of life? We're stuck. There's a thing that's happening spiritually where we want to trust God, but then there's a practical side where you're like, well, you got to do this to make this happen. And you got to network or you got to sell yourself. And then there's some of us that are just fighting that. Like, I don't want to sell myself, to get what God has for me. And so would you just close us out? We're going to just close out with the prayer. And for those that are listening, for those that know the Lord and then those that don't, We are men of faith, and none of this is possible had it not been for God. So would you pray for us?
Jesus, I thank you for the opportunity to have honest conversation with my friend. And for those who have chosen to listen thus far, even up to this point of prayer, they're probably listening because something that was spoken resonates with something on the inside of their hearts. For those of us who are unwilling to sell ourselves for an opportunity or to sell our birthright for a pot of stew, I ask that you will open the doors that have our name on it. According to your word, Revelation 3:8, I set before you an open door that no man can shut. If you be kind enough to open the door that has our name on it, we'll be faithful to walk through it and do our best with it. I pray for every listener that their heart will be encouraged, infused with strength today, and infused with joy, knowing that all of the rejection, every time they were overlooked, every time they were undervalued or marginalized, was actually preparation for what's coming. And there will be a moment of relevance that will validate the tears that they've cried. There will be a moment of relevance that will validate the pain that they've experienced. And when that moment comes, we will not occupy those moments with pride and I told you so attitude. We will occupy that moment with humility and grace because we remember what it's like to be overlooked and forgotten and laughed at. So please give us a heart to be everything you created us to be without apology, without fear, and without delay. Jesus, in your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.